We're back in Fresno, California at Turner's Auto Wrecking, but this is no rerun. This yard is 85 acres big, too big to show you in one episode. This is Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. I'm Steve Mignonti, hot rod historian, author, and lover of all things cars. I travel all across the country to uncover the forgotten and hidden gems of the automotive world. And now, I'm on the hunt for the next Roadkill Junkyard Rescue project. This is Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. We're back in Fresno, California at Turner's Auto Wrecking for a second stab at this yard. This place is so big with 85 acres. We've shown it to you once, we're gonna show it to you again. Now I understand there's a big collection of underdog GM muscle cars out here. We're gonna look at them. A big block Ford Fastback from the 60s. Could it be a Shelby? And as always, the guys from Roadkill have tasked me with finding them a Roadkill rescue candidate. I think I'm gonna find them a Mopar. It's all coming up right now on Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. While most of these cars, it's obvious why they're here, either accident damage, theft, fire, collision, that sort of thing. You gotta wonder why some of the cars end up here. They're just too clean. Well, in Southern California, there's a thing called a crush campaign. There are some companies that actually will sponsor these things, and they take cars, give people $800 to buy the car, then they crush it and buy pollution credits on the other side of the coin. This 66 Ranchero might well have been one. This thing is too clean to be in the junkyard. Look at these quarter panels and fenders. This thing is arrow straight. Ranchero fans will know that this is a 66 and it's a one-year model. The thing I love about the junkyard is it's an impromptu classroom. Just take a peek at the 1957 where it all started. Well, here it is, the very beginning of the Ranchero dynasty, 1957, and basically what Ford did is took their two-door station wagon, removed the roof, created a cargo bed, and voila, the Ranchero was born. Now, these were full-size cars built on a body-on-frame type architecture, but for 1960, Ford radically redesigned it. This is the compact-size Ranchero for 1960. Now, this is quite a bit smaller because it's based on Ford's first compact, the Falcon. They're unit construction, not body on frame, so these are not half-tonners, and these ran through 1965. From 1966 through 1971, cars got bigger and bigger, being based on the Fairlane and Torino platform. These could be had with big block engines. There was still unit construction. They still had leaf springs, but the move was on toward bigger and bigger Rancheros. For 1972 through 79, another redesign. They really got big. They went back to body-on-frame construction, coil springs in the rear. You could get plush interiors with carpeting, bucket seats, air conditioning, V8s only, no six-cylinder engines. The 70s Rancheros have a following, but they're not nearly as popular as the ones from the 1960s. All right, just as I thought. While we saw a lot of carpeting and details and air conditioning and options on the other Rancheros, this one here is a stripper. This is the rubber floor mat you got if you didn't want to pay extra for carpeting. Radio delete car, too. Grandpa didn't want to pay the 80 bucks for the AM radio. 3-speed manual car. Here's the column right here. And this is austerity at its best. Ranchero was not a muscle car, so this would have had either a 6-cylinder or a small V8. And here is the VIN, 5th digit, the letter T. This would have had this 6-cylinder, 200 cubic inch engine, not a lot of power there, but the nice thing about this is that it does have 5-lug wheels. Here's why. And we have to remember that the Ranchero was an evolution of an existing Ford line. For 1966, Ford upsized to the Fairlane, which came with 5-lug wheels out of the box no matter what engine it had. And we have the 10-inch drums and the V8 front suspension so that if we put a V8 in this car later, we won't have to mess with the suspension at all. I think what I would do is take the money saved on not doing any body work, give it a $2,000 paint job, get a 5-liter Mustang GT engine, an AOD automatic, and build a Junkyard Gold parts hauler on the cheap. This car right here is incredibly historic. This is a 1949 Ford Custom. This is the first year for the total post-war redesign for Ford. They got away from bolt-on fenders, pontoon body style, to a fleet-side, slab-sided body. Eugene Bordenat and the guys designed these things. They got away from leaf springs up front, went to coil springs for the first time ever on Fords, a knee action suspension. The 49 Ford was a breakthrough design. I love finding aftermarket hot rod wheels in the junkyard, and this one here, Finnegan, it's for you. This is a Western rim as used on the Dukes of Hazzard General Lee. The only thing is, somebody put this on the wrong wheel and wallowed out the holes. So you might be able to weld it up and fix it, don't know. But you know the other three are here. Get out here, Finnegan, and find them. A 1968 Ford Torino. This is the first year for the fastback body on Ford's mid-sized Torino car. Ford launched the fastback market in 1965 with the 2+2 Mustang, but when it came to mid-sized cars, the bigger ones, well, they were kind of late to the game. Dodge Charger and AMC Marlin came along with fastback bodies before Torino did it. Something I see on this car is this black stripe, which tells us this is a GT. And a GT, you're talking V8 only. Inside, oh, I like what I'm seeing here. The transmission tunnel has a factory piercing for a floor-shifted transmission. Now, there were two options, of course, a 3-speed or a 4-speed manual or the C6 automatic. There would also be a console and bucket seats in this. It is a GT. In 1968, a big thing was passenger safety inside of the car. The padded dashboard and the padded horn pad were big advances, and here they are in pretty good condition. Now, because we don't see a clutch pedal, just a brake pedal, we know this car was an automatic. But that pedal tells us something pretty cool. We see the disc brake motif on that. Check this out. Ford's first disc brake package came along in 1965 for the Mustang as an option. They were provided by Kelsey Hayes, and they were kind of complex. They had 4 pistons in a caliper. Well, by 1968, Ford had learned some new tricks, including the single piston caliper. It was cheaper, lighter, but again, drum brakes were standard on Torino. The discs were an option. Now, this engine's long gone, but we can still learn from the VIN what it had. We see the letter Y. That is weird. That means this car had a 390 2-barrel. Usually the GT will have a 390 with a 4-barrel, but whoever ordered this car wanted the torque and the power of the 390, but the economy of a 2-barrel carburetor. Another thing we see in here are the notorious Ford spring towers. If you've ever owned a Ford big block, you've tried to add headers or even change spark plugs, you'll learn all about trying to get your hand between the spring tower and that V8 engine. Not a lot of fun, but that's how they built them. Let's check out the other side of the car. Okay, the quarter is missing. Actually, this impromptu junkyard cutaway gives us an opportunity to check out the inner structure of the Torino fastback body style. Now, this was a unit construction car, not a body on frame like the full-size Fords were at this point in time. And we can see here, the rocker box has been exposed by the torch, and inside we can see the galvanized coating that was applied at Ford. They dipped these bodies up to about here to help preserve the metal and keep it from rusting. If this looks like the inside of a garbage can, same stuff, galvanized. And here we see the Torino fastback's best side, and actually its worst feature. Here's why. These had a very short trunk lid, which means when you opened it, the access is quite short. So to load any kind of luggage or groceries, you had to reach inside. By contrast, there was a hardtop version of Torino, which had a much flatter, larger trunk with a big lid. So while these cars were more graceful and beautiful to look at, the small cargo access on this actually limited sales, and these lag behind even convertibles on the showroom floor. But I love the originality of this car. The original Torino GT logo still in place. It reminds us of this car's sporting intent. It deserves to live on. With its missing quarter panel, doors, fenders, and all that stuff, I think this car is a little too far gone for roadkill, but if it were mine, I think I would do the work myself and give it an amateur restoration. I'd weld on a fresh quarter panel, get some doors, reproduction fenders, and hood. I'd put a big block under there, but probably a 514 cubic inch FE motor, call it a 390, and spook some people. But I'd definitely keep the original black GT stripes on the side. That's what attracted me in the first place. Well, here's a Hemi head in the junkyard. You know, back in the 1950s, Hemis were available in Chryslers, DeSotos, and Dodges, and they were all different engines. You gotta watch yourself. Here's the thing, this one here measures 17 3/4 inches from end to end. That means this is a DeSoto Hemi, which is the least desirable of the bunch. So if you bought this and thought you were gonna make money at the swap meet, not gonna happen. It also gives us a nice look at the Hemi head. There's the hemispherical combustion chamber, intake and exhaust valves open toward the center so they're not shrouded. So it has Hemi magic, but it does not have Hemi resale power. Watch out. This is pretty cool. This is a vintage ambulance, and you gotta keep in mind that since the mid-1970s, ambulances have been based on cube vans and light trucks, but that wasn't always the case. This is an example of how ambulances used to be made. This is a 61 Pontiac Bonneville. It's called a commercial chassis. Pontiac would sell this car to a contractor, basically as a go-kart. There would be no body on the back, and it would go off to a company like this, Superior, in Mississippi, and they would finish out the construction of the fiberglass ambulance body. They'd sometimes stretch the wheelbase, but it was all based on a commercial chassis. And something kind of cool is this trim tag right here. We see the paint code on this, it says Prime. That means this car was sent off to Superior in primer because they wanted to paint it their own color. These cars are really cool amongst collectors of professional cars, or in some cases, because of the heavy-duty suspension, a guy doing a Super Duty clone might want to grab the suspension and brake parts off this piece. All right here in the junkyard. Hardcore fans of Roadkill will recognize this car from episode number 31. This is a 1976 Cosworth Vega that Freiberger and Finnegan considered. They didn't end up using it. Vega? Performance? Fun? Good? Yeah. Right here. If you don't know your Vega history, they first came out in 1971 as an answer to the Ford Pinto and all of the Toyotas and Hondas that were invading from overseas. Now, the Vega was alive for 4 model years when they decided to add some zest in the form of the Cosworth edition. Cosworth is a British race car company. They are kings in the world of Formula One, did a lot of engine development. So they got together, created the Cosworth Vega, which only sold for 75 and 76. Chevrolet conspired with them to create a 2-liter overhead cam, 16-valve 4-cylinder that was meant to rev high, make power. Let's see if we still have it under the hood. Ah, bummer. On the episode of Roadkill, it was still here and pretty much intact. What Cosworth did was de-stroke the engine to 2 liters, had forged rods, forged pistons, and that special cylinder head. And of course, a factory stainless steel exhaust header, a first on the Cosworth. Now, Chevrolet had high hopes. They wanted to have 150 horsepower, but the trouble was federal emission standards kept de-smogging the engine and choking it down to where it only made 110 horsepower, 18 more potent than the 2.3-liter Vega motor. Price on these cars was $5,900, about a grand less than a Corvette. These cost $1,000 more than a Camaro, so the public didn't really see the value in these cars. Kind of a shame. Cosworth Vegas had a number of unique features, and they start in the glove compartment. No, not the registration, but rather a computer. Up at the top are the microprocessors that ran the electronic fuel injection, one of the first instances of electronic control in a Chevrolet mass-produced car. Here is the hole where the transmission would have been. Now, no automatics. Cosworths were all manual transmissions. The gauges were also unique. The speedometer went to 120 miles per hour versus 100 on lesser Vegas, and the tachometer, to keep up with the free-breathing 16-valve 2-cam head, went to 8,000 RPM. To prevent wheel hop, the Cosworth Vega got an all-new rear suspension design. Chevrolet came up with a torque arm that went from the rear axle to the transmission, and that was only seen on Cosworths until the arrival of the Chevy Monza, which then used the same type of rear suspension. And in fact, that same torque arm suspension and the axle was even used in Gen 3 and 4 Firebirds up into the 1990s. Additionally, these cars had a Watts link and a high-flow exhaust system. Now, this has the catalytic converter, but something I'm seeing right here is that oval flange would have bolted to the end of the Cosworth-only stainless steel exhaust header. Now, Cosworth engine was electronic fuel injected. Supplying the fuel was this right here. This is the original electric fuel pump, and to make sure the car stood out from the herd, there was some unique body graphics, too. Cosworth Vegas were rendered in a variety of different colors, but the classic one is black with gold accents as seen here. And of course, that gold also transferred to the anodized wheels. These were very classy cars. You might think of it as a miniature Trans Am Blackbird a couple of years before the fact. But the sad thing is, in total, only 3,508 Cosworth Vegas were built, and sadly was a marketplace dud. I can kind of see why the Roadkill guys passed on it. All the rare stuff is missing. A restoration is pretty much out of the question on this thing. But I think I'd still still try and put it back on the road. You know, maybe I put a 350 in it, just get it running and leave it like it is and just roadkill it and dig on it. It deserves to live on. It shouldn't be crushed. It's a Cosworth-Vega. A 66 Malibu 4-door. What the heck is this? This is wacky. This is weird. I've never seen this before, but I think I know what this is. This is a very early emission control system. What happens is there's an air pump that draws air from inside the air cleaner, which then gets fed to these two manifolds and then into the exhaust tract right here, where the air increases the temperature of the exhaust gases, burning more of the unburnt fuel and cleaning up the air. You will not find that on 49 state cars, just California. I could tell the guys at Roadkill we found a 4-door Mopar Hemi car in the junkyard. I mean, that's incredibly rare. Trouble is, it's a fire door, which means it's a DeSoto. And the Hemi is gone. I think Freiberger would call this one a DeSoto don't. Let's skip it. Two kinds of damage generally put a car in the junkyard, mechanical and cosmetic. And for too many years, automakers would design their bumpers with very susceptible lenses and, well, these things with about a 5-mile-an-hour impact would be bent, smashed, and destroyed. The insurance companies got sick of writing checks for cosmetic damage to cars. So by 1975, the front and rear of a car should have been able to take an impact without any visible damage. Case in point, we see here the metal crash bar behind the tail of this Firebird from Pontiac. This will take a hit up to about 2.5 miles per hour. The urethane fascia will bold, come right back to shape. No harm done, no check written. And speaking of plastic, this one does have a fiberglass trunk spoiler. Now, that doesn't guarantee this is a Trans Am or a Formula, because you could get this as an option on a base Firebird by this point in time, 1981. You gotta look further. Oh yeah, okay. There it is, that's the Formula steering wheel, which was standard equipment on all Trans Ams. We see the tachometer on this thing. This has a 5,000 RPM red line, which is kind of an idling speed for a muscle car engine. In the 60s, this would have been a 6,000 RPM tach. And next to it, the speedometer reads to 80 miles per hour. The federal government was helping Detroit design and build cars, and they mandated that speedometers go to 80 miles per hour midway through 1979. I guess the idea was to help people stay below the speed limit. Oh, and as we look through the windshield, this has the asymmetrical scoop with the turbo meltdown indicator. This is a turbo Trans Am. Yeah, right on. Very complete. Air cleaners in place. In the 1970s, Pontiac used 400s and 455s in the Trans Ams. Well, for 1980, those motors went away. So what they did is took their 301 V8, put a turbo on it, and hope for the best. This is Pontiac's LU8 turbocharged V8. This cost $350 over the standard 301 4-barrel, and these made 210 horsepower and 340 foot-pounds of torque. That's a lot for a 301 cubic inch engine. This is the cast iron turbine, the aluminum compressor. This is what blows air under the carburetor. So this is a draw-through carburetor system. That's a Rochester 4-barrel, 800 CFM, and at full boost, this thing makes between 7 and 9 PSI of pressure. And you had to have air conditioning. That was a standard equipment item on the turbo cars because it also guaranteed the heavy-duty cooling system. These things made a lot of heat. Speaking of which, the underside of the hood here, we see the heat shield, which was mandatory because that lives right over the turbo, which can make over 1,000 degrees temperature on a hot day. That could blister the paint without the shield. Now here's the rub. These cars were built in Norwood, Ohio, or Van Nuys, California, but this was not legal for sale in California because of the emissions. So this car was built in Van Nuys, but I hope it was never registered in California because that would have been illegal. Now, I happen to know that Dave Freiberger hates these cars, especially the turbo cars. He calls them the turbo meltdown wonders. And Trans Ams in general, he kind of sees them as being disco mobiles. Now, if this Trans Am were mine, I hate to say it, it's a little too far gone, and these aren't quite valuable enough yet to warrant the $30,000 or $40,000 it would take to bring it back to life. But I would grab that 301 turbo engine and the lockup turbo 350 transmission, put that into a Vega or maybe a Nova or something like that and lay some rubber. This has 340 foot-pounds of torque. This is Junkyard Gold at its best. sliced and diced. They used to call these cars the potato era of styling because it looks like a potato. This is a Lincoln Zephyr. This is where the headlamps were leaded onto the fenders. See the factory lead right there? It's not a one-piece stamping, but that's how Lincoln did it back in the day. 1937, the Zephyr. Oh, this is one for the guys from Roadkill. This is a first-generation Plymouth Valiant. These things were built between 1960 and 62, and even cooler, this thing is a two-door post. Now, these have a lot of NASCAR history. Just as we have SUVs today that are red hot in the marketplace, well, in 1960, the compacts were the big deal. Corvair, Falcon, Studebaker, Nash, and Valiant all duked it out on the showroom floor. So what NASCAR did was set up a thing called the Baby Grand Race Circuit. Before big races like the Daytona 500, they set up small tracks for the compact cars to duke it out. Guys like Marvin Panch, Lee Petty, Richard Petty ran hyperpack-equipped Valiants and dominated the class. Design details that make the first-gen A-body good for racing are the unit construction. It's pretty rigid and pretty light, and the front torsion bar suspension. It's tight and really good at resisting roll. The cowl height on the Valiant is quite low, and that was made possible by the Slant 6 engine. The Slant 6 takes its name from its 30-degree slant from the vertical. The whole point of that was to get the height of the engine down so the Valiant could have a lower cowl height and sleeker styling. But one of the nice side effects of that was it allowed extra space and more distance to the carburetor. Now, the stock Slant 6 intake manifold is this puppy right here. It's semi-tuned, and it's a pretty good piece compared to anything else on the market. But in the case of the Baby Grand cars, Chrysler came up with something called the Hyperpack, a long aluminum intake manifold with a 4-barrel carburetor, which really filled up the space between the engine and the inner fender. But the Hyperpack was a major part of the Baby Grand Valiant's success. Now, speaking of success or lack thereof, these cars were pretty controversial with the public. The styling was weird. Virgil Exner and his stylists, well, they kind of went to town on these cars, and not really in a good way. In fact, a lot of the car magazines lampooned it, and Chrysler was not happy. But we have hangovers from the 1950s, fins on the back, exaggerated fender flares, the prows, the deltoid grille were sort of all crunched together in a fairly small package. There wasn't enough room for this to breathe, and they sold fairly well. But again, after the 1962 model year, Chrysler dropped this body and went with a much more conventional design. But the crazy thing is, the bones underneath this body are pretty much the same bones under a Duster 340 or even a Dart 383. So the A-body platform underneath this skin went on for many years of success at Chrysler. Ugly or not, this car is straight and solid, and I think deserves to live on. And thanks to their love for the history of NASCAR racing, Freiberger and Finnegan need to do a roadkill rescue on this 62 Valiant. Here's what they should do. Take this car, spray it petty blue, apply a number 42 or number 43, but with a roadkill twist, and remind the world of the Baby Grand Series when little cars raced at NASCAR. And then build a Slant 6. I'd say take a 225, stroke it out to 240 cubic inches, port the head, not too much Dulcich, we know about you cracking them things, put on a Hyperpack intake manifold with the ram-tuned passages, a 4-barrel Edelbrock carburetor, and once it's running, I want to see him take it out on the road and terrorize some Corvairs, Falcons, and Studebakers, and let him know which compact is boss. It's Valiant, baby. There's a lot of great automotive history here at Turner's Auto Wrecking. We saw some 70s and 80s smog-era GM muscle cars, a big block Torino, not a bad car right there, and that little Ranchero pickup truck is so straight it needs to be restored. Well, stick around, there's more Junkyard Gold. We might be back in a junkyard near you. Thanks for watching.
A couple lines about junkyard dogs.
There you go. It's my better side. I need this back.